The Neutrino feature in Neutron is tucked away at the bottom of the output area in the lower right corner of the plugin window. This same processing has been made available as a free plugin as well, which can be used on its own in a mix on various tracks, but I'll look at the version within Neutron itself. Neutrino is kind of like a finishing process. It's meant to be applied to a track after the rest of the usual processing has been done and the basic sound of the track is in place. Neutrino can then add its subtle polish to the overall sound, just a little extra presence and clarity to help each track hold its own in the mix. This is accomplished via iZotope's spectral shaping. The spectral shaping process was apparently developed originally for one of iZotope's mastering limiter algorithms. It was meant to optimize transparency while processing the audio, and that's the idea here as well. To do this, spectral shaping divides the full frequency range of the audio into 32 narrow frequency bands, and then applies some very subtle dynamic processing to them independently. The idea is to ensure freedom from undesirable resonances and peaky bits in the audio, and keep the overall balance smooth and well managed, but without creating more than a very subtle change in the overall tonality and dynamics of the track. The 32 bands are based on the Mel scale. This is similar to the divisions in a third octave spectrum graph, but the scale is based on psychoacoustic analysis of human perception of pitch differentials. You could envision this as a 32-band version of a multiband compressor with low ratios and automatically adjusting thresholds, or even better, as a 32-band dynamic EQ, as in Neutron's EQ module, processing narrow bands of audio as needed, again with the need determined by the intelligent analysis of the audio wave. The process includes several optimizations to make it work better on specific source material. There are algorithms specifically targeted to voice, both singing and dialogue, guitar and similar instruments, bass, and drums and percussive sounds, including effects in post-production applications. Each mode applies processing with a slightly different emphasis. Voice mode focuses on mid and high frequencies. Instrument or guitar mode looks for resonances that could afford to be smoothed out for a better, more consistent balance. Bass mode looks to control the lows, naturally, keeping dynamics even. And drum mode seeks to maintain transient detail and avoid muddiness for some subtle snap. When the effect is automatically enabled as part of the track assistance analysis and auto setup, the user doesn't have to select the correct algorithm. Neutron analyzes the audio and makes the correct choice automatically. It seems to be right the vast majority of the time. But if you decide to use Neutron to process a track by hand, rather than by evoking the track assistant, you can also enable the Neutrino function manually by selecting the appropriate algorithm yourself from the Neutrino menu down there at the lower right. However it's activated, there are then two sliders that can be used to fine-tune the effect. Detail lets you dial up how much sheen or presence you want the spectral shaping processing to apply. And Amount, naturally, dials up the overall strength of the effect. If you pull Amount all the way down, you've basically turned the effect off.
Your seductive promises are always so enticing. Out of sight, out of mind, fall for it every time. Watch out, here they come.
Of course, you can always try out a different mode on a particular instrument just to see how it might benefit a certain track. At one point, I noticed that Neutrino identified a Hammond B3 track as bass, but I realized that did make sense, as the part was mostly dark, low chords that fell into the overall bass range in terms of frequency and tonality. The Neutrino effect, at its best, is and should be subtle. In fact, it's probably most noticeable when you A/B it on and off against the mix, where you can hear the subtle extra lift it provides. Kind of like pulling back a veil and bringing the sound just a little more into focus.
Your seductive promises are always so enticing. Out of sight, out of mind, fall for it every time.
Now, you might have noticed one more option in the Neutrino algorithm menu, Clean. This is what Neutrino auto-selects when it determines that the track doesn't fit into any of its 4 categories. Apparently, keyboards mostly seem to trigger an auto-selection of Clean. But, as I pointed out, that doesn't mean you can't experiment with using the supposedly wrong algorithm on whatever instrument you'd like. Just remember, if Neutrino's processing is obvious, then you're probably applying it too heavily. The key is subtlety. Here's an example of the subtle difference Neutrino's spectral shaping can make on an overall mix.
You're seductive, promises are always so enticing. You're seductive, promises are always so enticing. Out of sight, out of mind, fall for it every time.
Next up, I'll take a look at Neutron's very useful masking meter.